In this video, I'll show you how to install Linux Mint in VMware. I'm going to assume that you know how to install an application under Windows. Once you download VMware, if you double-click it and then follow the instructions, if you follow the defaults by clicking Next, then everything should be set up on your system. What is different is installing an operating system within VMware, so that's what we'll concentrate on today. But realize that you would have had to have installed VMware prior to doing what we're going to be doing in just a few seconds. So you've installed VMware, and it's going to show up somewhere like this in your Start menu, and you can click on VMware, and it'll take a second to start. And actually, I've already got it started here, so let's switch this around so you can see it. And we've got VMware Workstation 8 up and running. Now mine's going to look a little different from you because you won't have anything over here on the left because you haven't installed any other operating systems within VMware. But notice that how many different operating systems I've installed over here. I've installed various versions of Linux, including Mint, damn small Linux, Tiny Core, Ubuntu. I've also got Windows Professional, and I've got some some Ubuntu servers in here as well. And the reason I do this for several reasons is one of which is to try out the new versions of the operating system to see how much I like them. And also I do this for other classes where we have network computers together, and for example I may do some network incident response, so it allows me to create those pieces of media for my students. So this is the user interface, and notice that you have a file menu up here, then you have icons, and then in here you also have some icons as well. Notice that across the top, if you go to Home, which actually should show up first, is that this has a lot of scroll over menu items right here that you can also find up in the menu system. So you can use either one to access these items. On the left hand side is you have your library, and these are all the different operating systems that you've installed. Over here in this quadrant of the screen, you'll see if you go up to these tabs right here, that's Mint 12. And usually when you install, they will actually start showing up over here on the favorite items. And this tells you a little bit about the operating system that I've installed. For example, the memory has been set to 512 megabytes. I've set it up for 2 processors, an 8 gigabyte hard drive, what the CD DVD, that is a virtual CD DVD, is attached to. The floppy, the network adapter is set to network address translation, and so on. But this will be up to you when you create your new virtual machine to set these parameters yourself, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second. Also note in here is that there's a screen capture of the last thing that was running, so it's really cool that you see the state of this is that it was running and it had a terminal open right in here. And a terminal is just a place for you to type commands. But it shows you that I was able to pause my operating system rather than to turn it off, which is a great thing to be able to do because it cuts down on the startup time. And so if you want to pause your operating system and then close VMware, you can, and then you can start right back up by clicking on Resume this virtual machine. You can also edit the virtual machine settings by clicking on Edit Virtual Machine Settings. So this tells you you can change the memory, the number of processors, the hard disk, and so on. Now you can't do this while it's suspended, but you can do it if you shut down your operating system, then make the changes, and then resume it as normal. And we'll do all this in just a second. Also note down here the virtual machine details. It says that the state is suspended, the configuration file, its location, and the hardware compatibility. Workstation 8 virtual machine, which is what you should be using. Okay, so you've downloaded your Linux Mint ISO, and so what we want to do is we want to create a new virtual machine. Well, one thing I want to add over here, if you look right in here, you'll note that these have little pause buttons on them. Some of these do, every one but TinyCore. The TinyCore, this tells you something about how the device was configured, but it also shows you that it was turned off because it doesn't have this little pause icon on it, and the screen is black, but everything else has been paused. You see, I was right in the middle of typing something here where I paused it. Let's see if we can see. Here's Mint 9 with a different type of user interface with a terminal open. Notice now that these are showing up here under your favorites. But what we want to do is we want to create a new virtual machine. Now if you want to scroll through these, you can go up here to the scroll menu in the top right and scroll through them. If you've got so many, we can go back to home, and then we can create a new virtual machine. You can also do this by going up to the file menu and selecting new virtual machine. So let's create new virtual machine. Let's see what we have. So this is a wizard that walks you through how to do this, and we're going to be using the custom advanced option right here. And the reason is that with the typical settings, it makes a huge hard drive. It's like 20 gigabytes, and we really don't need that much space. So what we want to do is give you sufficient space so that you can grow and add programs and update your system without it taking up much more space than you actually need. So click on Custom Advanced, click Next. This should be set to Workstation 8, which is what we're using. If you think you're going to be using something, an earlier version, which you won't be, you shouldn't be, you can click on something else, but we're using Workstation 8. This tells you a little bit about the compatible products, which we're only concerned with Workstation 8 here, and the limitations, but notice what size that you could create. The 64 gigabyte of memory with 8 processors, 10 network adapters, and a 2 terabyte disk size limit. Very complex and powerful system. So we don't really need to do anything here. We click on Next, and we're going to download this. Excuse me, what are we going to use for installation? Well, we've downloaded an ISO file, that Linux Mint ISO file that you use, so we're going to make sure that we click on Installer Disk Image File. You see right here, this was the last thing that I uploaded. It also says, could not detect which operating system is in this disk image. And what that means is that VMware has the capability of detecting what type of operating system, in many cases, is on your ISO system, and then it can make appropriate choices based upon whatever operating system it is. So you'll find out if you use Ubuntu, and I believe Red Hat, or any version of Windows, that it will go ahead and set some intelligent defaults for you. So this is what we want to click. We want to select Installer Disk Image File. Then we want to browse to that file. Mine's already selected. Notice that I've got a bunch of ISOs in here. But we're going to select Linux Mint, GNOME, CD, no codecs. This is 64-bit because my machine is 64-bit. So I can use this. Click Open. And if you make sure that that's selected appropriately, we can click Next. What type of system is it? Well, it knows that it's Linux, but it's not sure what distribution it is. But if you're using some other operating system, such as Windows, you could select that. Notice if you do decide to install Windows, notice all the different versions of Windows that are on here. We want Linux, and it's guessing at Ubuntu because it's a very popular version. If we click down on the version, we can see all the different options in here. CentOS, which is Red Hat based, Debian, which is really the grandfather of Mint and Ubuntu, Fedora, which is Red Hat based, Mandrake, boy that's an old version, Mandrivia, It's a newer version of Mandrake, that's French. OpenSUSE, which is kind of Red Hat based. And then you have all your Red Hat systems down here. Oh, so ours is not showing up in here. We don't see Mint, right? Well, we do know that it's a 2.6 kernel. That's the version of the kernel that we used. And I downloaded the 64-bit, and it really doesn't matter what you select in here. Just select the 2.6 kernel. Let's just do that. And now it's going to allow us to type what our virtual machine name is. And this is important because that could be really anything that has a 2.6 kernel. So we're going to name ours Mint 12. And this shows you the location where it will keep our virtual machine file under Documents, Virtual Machines. And you can change that if you wish, but I always keep that as the default. You click Next. Now the number of processors, you can never list more processors in here than you actually have on your physical machine. So that shows you, well, you've only got 2 processors, so that's the max, or the number of cores. For right now, let's leave that as 1 and 1. You can go back and remember that you can change that later on, but let's just keep it as 1 and 1 now. And now the memory for the virtual machine. And notice that it says the recommended memory is 256. The maximum is nearly 6 gigabytes. And we're going to be running a graphical user interface, even though we're not going to be working within the GUI very much. But we want to go ahead and keep the graphical user interface, so it's going to require at minimum 256 megabytes, which is, well, they say it's recommended, but that's probably a minimum. So we can bump this, if you want, to, say, 512. I know from experience that works well. Can you imagine running Windows XP with 512 megabytes of RAM? Or Windows 7? I don't think so. Okay, let's set that to 512. Now, if you have 8 gigabytes of RAM and you're only going to be running a single instance of a VM, you can bump this up if you want. You can bump that up to 1024. But 512 is good. And later on you can go back and play with this. You can shut down the operating system and work with different values and see if it takes a big hit on the virtual machine's performance. So there's lots you can play with. It's much easier playing with this than it is an actual physical system, right? Changing in and out RAM. Okay, different ways of connecting to the network. We want to use network address translation, which means that our VMware will be serving as a router, and your operating system will be given a private address. And usually that's a 192.168 address. So we'll leave that as NAT. This is recommended LSI logic. I've never had to change these. I use the recommended. It's always worked. Now, we do want to create a new virtual disk because we're going to need to install the operating system on this disk. So this is a virtual hard drive. So it's going to be a little hard drive sitting somewhere on your computer. Notice there's other things that you can do as well, but we want to keep it on create a new virtual disk. It says recommended SCSI. Let's keep it as that. And now the maximum disk size. And usually this says 20. And I always use about 8. I've used as little as 4 or 5. Usually you start filling that up, and then you're going to have to reconfigure your hard drive, add another hard drive, a virtual hard drive, and move some things over to the new partition. So let's keep it at 8 because it allows us to add some stuff and grow. A couple of things here. Allocate all this space now. Notice that I have that unchecked. What that means is that if I don't have this unchecked, the 8 gigabytes won't be allocated all at one time, but it will allow the virtual hard drive rather to grow as it's needed up to 8 gigabytes. So it may use 3 gigabytes at first. Okay, so you'll get a 3 gigabyte hard drive, and then as you start adding more and more applications, if you do, to your hard drive. This can grow up to 8 gigabytes. So let's leave that unchecked. And this really doesn't matter right here unless you're going to be copying files off. Store virtual disk as a single file, or you can split it, virtual disk, into multiple files. So let's go store virtual disk as a single file, because we won't be copying it. We click next. This tells you the disk file will be one 8 gigabyte disk file using this name, virtual machine disk, as the extension. Let's click next. Let's go back here and make sure this is everything we wanted: the location, the operating system, 8 gigabytes, 512 megabyte RAM, network address translation, and the other devices. Notice this says power on this virtual machine after creation. Yes. Well, let's say when you're trying to install Windows on a new computer or an old computer, if you're reinstalling Windows, what happens when you boot from the CD? Because essentially that's what we're doing here. We've got the CD DVD attached to that ISO, so we're essentially booting from a virtual disk. Click finish. Click, I don't know why it didn't power up. We click power on this virtual machine. Note it automatically boots, or we can hit enter here. And in the old days, what this is doing is it's going in and decompressing a compressed bootloader, which is allowing it to boot into Linux and the Linux kernel. And used to, this is everything you'd see, and don't worry about this message. So remember, we're working off, this is essentially a CD running in RAM. Okay, so we've got Linux running on our Windows box. Isn't that awesome? So, and I actually carry around a USB drive that's got a version of Linux installed on it, because I can use it for troubleshooting or forensics, for booting into a Windows machine from my USB drive. Essentially, you're doing the same thing here, only you're doing it with a CD. And this will be the interface that you'll be seeing when you install it. And so it's got a menuing system up here. You can see your applications all in here. Notice it has Firefox. So I could actually use this, if this was on a CD or a USB stick, I could use this as an operating system. Okay, so this is what it's going to look like. Notice that there's an icon here that says Install Linux Mint. That's what we want to do. So you can go ahead and we can double click on this. And our installer launches. We select our language. I assume everything's going to be English for everyone in this class. If not, you can use any language you want if you prefer. Might not be able to answer your questions if you get stuck, but I can answer your English questions. Okay, for best results, please ensure that the computer has 3.7 gigabytes of available drive space. It does. We have up to 8 gigabytes, and it's connected to the internet. And I know I'm connected to the internet because the installer is going to download files that it needs, the most recent files, in order to have an updated system. Okay, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do this the easy way, and we're going to let the installer erase and install Linux Mint without going in and formatting the hard drive manually. which usually creates a problem. I can upload a video that shows you how to do this, but the first time you do this, I would suggest that you just let Linux Mint install this. If you're going to be doing this for your livelihood, you darn sure want to know how to create partitions and format them and things of that nature. But for the first time, you don't want to go in and muck around with that, because that's a good way to get stuck. But that's the way I learned, but I got stuck a lot. Okay, select a drive. Well, there's only one that we can select. The virtual machine SDA, SCSI device A. That's the first one. It's 8 gigabytes, and it shows you how it's partitioned. It's not, or this will show you how it will be partitioned. This won't make a lot of sense right now, but it will later on what dev SDA is. And ext4 is the most recent version of a extended Linux file system. You can click now. See down here we have updates on what the installer is doing. It's creating the file system. Now it's going to ask us what time zone we're in. I want to make sure this is accurate. We are in the same time zone as New York, Eastern Daylight Time right now. We can continue. Notice that it's doing some multitasking. It's copying some files, but it will also be asking you questions along the way. I'm going to pause the video because it's going to take a while for this to install, but when something interesting or exciting happens, I'll flip back. Okay, it's asking us what type of keyboard we want. English and English. I'm going to select that. Unless you're a Cherokee, you can select that. Click continue. Okay, the next screen is who are you? And so you're going to be setting up your account in Linux that will serve as your administrative account. And it works similarly as it does to Windows. In other words, it requires an administrator to make certain changes for security purposes. And this can be any name you want, and I always use PC for mine. Do not name yours PC. Okay, this is going a little slowly. Several students send me in things and they use exactly what I use. I mean, don't do that. In fact, you should type in your real name here. This is really slow. Wow. And your computer's name. So this will be the name of your computer, and I just hit tab to go to the next line, and I name mine whatever my operating system is, Mint 12, because that's what's going to show up on the command line that you'll be using. And so if you have, wow, really slow. So I name mine Mint 12. And then your username. So your actual name should go up in here, and that will go in a special file, and we'll talk about that later. And also on the login screen, this is what will show up. But you want to pick a username. And so if your name is Mark Jones, you can call it M Jones. If your name is Laura Smith, it can be L Smith, it can be anything. This is just the way that I do mine. And then choose a password. And I'm telling you right now, in general, you want a password that is a certain level of complexity, such as 8 to 15 characters with upper, lower case, and numbers and special characters. But for this, please use something simple that you will remember, because we get into so many issues with students forgetting their passwords, and they say, well, I can't find my password. Well, you're doing this from afar, and I can't get in and fix your problem. If I'm there in a lab, I can fix it, but here I can't. So go ahead and just use password or something simple that you remember. If you do forget, please don't email me or post it. You just have to reinstall again. So there's a password that I always use for all of my systems that is not easy to guess, but it's something that I've done on probably 100 different VMs. So I'll remember this. Yeah, it's a weak password, but it's better than the word password. Can log in automatically. Let's go ahead and keep this unchecked. Require my password to log in. Yes. Don't include encrypt my home folder. This is a little advanced option. You know, in real life, I would suggest doing that. For here, you don't have to do that. So you've got your full name. You've got the name of what your computer will be. You picked a username. I've got my password that I can remember. And we're going to click continue. I'm going to pause the video. Now you've completed all the information that you needed to supply. And now this will just be several screens showing you some of the features of Linux Mint. Notice it also says almost finished copying files. It's been about 10 minutes. Yours may be slower, yours may be faster, depends on how much RAM you've allocated and how much physical RAM you have. Ready when you are. Well, we'll see. Now it's installing the system. First it was copying the files, now it's installing everything you see. And here's what I was talking about. It just shows you some of the features available. And I'm going to pause the video again. Notice that at the bottom it gives you an estimate of how much time is remaining. And that's usually not accurate because this jumps around a lot depending upon the speed of your network. I don't think I've ever found this to be I think so.
The whole time config file.
And we're done. And so that took about maybe 20 minutes overall. It was a little slow. So now we can continue testing. Remember, we're running Linux and RAM. But we'll go ahead and we'll restart. Click restart. And you see some of the messages that are going by as we're rebooting. Notice that this says down here, please remove installation media and close the tray if any. So it assumes that you've got a DVD in. But what we can do is we can go back up to VM settings, and note here is that we're using the ISO. We can go back and click use the physical drive because we don't want to boot from that ISO anymore. Click OK. Oh, and one thing you need to know is your focus. Notice here that you've got this little hand pointing on the screen. Well, that means that VMware, the actual OS, doesn't have focus. It's outside. But if you click inside, notice that goes away. If you want to grab that back so that you've got focus outside of the window, click Control and Alt. See that? Click inside, Control and Alt. Okay. But if I try to type something now, it's not going to work because the focus is not within the operating system. So I click back there and hit Enter. can hit Control and Alt again and click I finished installing. And we have the boot screen. We're running Linux Mint 12. Notice that this has my full name here and my password. Just get a taste of what Linux Mint looks like for the first week of class. And you'll see it looks very similar to what we saw before. Only now it's on your hard drive. And this just is a little welcome screen that tells you a little bit about what's available. Notice that there's a user guide. We can click Show this dialog at startup. Click Close. Let's go up here and look at the applications, accessories. Notice there's different accessories. First thing I want you to do is to click this terminal. I haven't clicked on it yet. Hold the left mouse down and drag it up and put it right there. There, you can always access that. And that's our terminal. That's where we're going to be running all the Linux commands. And I'll talk about that in a little more in a second. So you know, if you've got graphics applications, we can connect to the internet. Let's click on Firefox web browser. Let's see if we can connect to the internet. Son of a gun, there we are. There's online.daytonastate.edu, so you can log in here. So when you do your homework, you can do it and you can write it out to a text file. Let's go up here and it should be under, let me see, accessories. There's a text editor right here you can use to do your homework and then upload it right within Linux. Let's click Close. Let's just go up quickly and look at the terminal. Click on that. Here's where you'll be doing all of your exercises, your assignments. So notice it just looks like a DOS terminal. Linux is a very powerful operating system based on Unix, but rewritten. And notice over here on the left we have PC at Mint 12. Mint 12 is the name of my computer and PC is my username. And to get out of the terminal we type exit. And now the next thing I want you to do is to go up to VM in the menu, go down to Snapshot and take a snapshot. And a snapshot is like a recovery point in Windows, and it's a known good state of your system. So we're going to call this Fresh Install. And we take a snapshot, and it saves this information out to the hard drive. The next time if we do have an issue, we can't start our hard drive, we can't start our virtual machine, we go up to VM, Snapshot, and notice I've got 3 snapshots already here. So all of these actually are the same state as what I'm running right now, only just taking a few minutes apart. But if we want to revert to one of these, we can, and so we can recover from our problem. So please do that. In fact, don't just please do it, do it. Every semester I have one person who doesn't take a snapshot, then theirs is the computer that always has an issue. I've had it every semester. Okay, so we've got that, and now how do we get out of our Mint? Well, there's a few ways of doing that. And if we go up to, notice that we have this pause icon right here. Notice that it's showing right now down here Mint 12 that's got the green arrow indicating it's running. Is it running? Yes, it's running. We go up to the pause button and click down. Notice that there's 3 options. There's a power off, which is like pulling the AC plug from your computer. We don't want to do that. Reset is like hitting Control Alt Delete. We don't want to do that. Suspend is like hibernating your computer. So we hit suspend. Notice that it quickly says it's saving the state of the virtual machine. And that was the state, right? That's where it was. If we go back and either click this, the green arrow here, or the green triangle, we click resume state. It restores it. And we're back to where we were. Let's go ahead and open a few applications. Here we go. We're going to have those on the screen. And now let's pause. And notice that an updated screenshot of what it looks like. So you know where you left off. So that ends this this first lecture demonstrating how to create a new virtual machine and install Linux Mint within that. So you should start practicing now, and by Friday you should have, or at least Saturday or Sunday, you should have your Mint installed and played around with it some. Then we'll start learning about Linux and some of the commands on week 2.